If your grocery bill feels higher lately, you're not imagining it. Even when the news says inflation is cooling, your total at checkout keeps climbing. Milk costs more, meat costs more, snacks cost more, and somehow, even when prices stabilize, they never really go back down. So what's actually happening? Because this isn't just random price increases, this is something much bigger. Today, we're breaking down why grocery prices keep rising, who benefits from it, what most people misunderstand about inflation, and whether this is temporary or the new normal. And there's one hidden factor driving food prices higher that almost nobody talks about. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why your grocery bill feels permanently higher and what that means for your money. Let's break it down. Reason 1. Corporate greed, when profits matter more than people. Let's start with the most uncomfortable truth. Grocery prices aren't rising because stores are struggling to stay afloat. They're rising because grocery companies are making record profits, and they're doing it by raising prices faster than their costs are increasing. In 2023, a parliamentary committee investigated food inflation in Canada. They called in the CEOs of Canada's 3 largest grocery chains, Loblaws, Sobeys, and Metro. These 3 companies control roughly 60% of the grocery market in Canada, and the numbers they were forced to disclose were shocking. In 2025, Loblaws reported a profit of $2 billion. Metro reported $850 million. Sobeys, owned by Empire Company, reported over $700 million. That's over $3.5 billion in combined profit during a cost of living crisis, while Canadians were skipping meals and choosing between groceries and rent. But here's where it gets worse. Those profits didn't come from selling more food. They came from raising prices. A 2024 report from the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives analyzed grocery store profit margins. They found that between 2021 and 2023, grocery retailers increased their profit margins by an average of 28%. In simple terms, grocery stores weren't just passing on higher costs. They were adding extra margin on top. A bag of apples that cost the store $3 to stock used to sell for $4.50. Now it sells for $6.99, but the store's cost only went up to $3.50. The rest, pure profit. One industry analyst from Toronto put it bluntly in an interview with CBC. Grocery chains saw inflation as an opportunity. They knew consumers expected prices to rise, so they raised them even more than necessary. And because there's so little competition in Canada, consumers had no choice but to pay. And it's not just grocery stores. Food manufacturers are doing the same thing. In 2023, PepsiCo admitted during an earnings call that they raised prices ahead of inflation to protect profit margins. Nestle, Kraft Heinz, and General Mills all did the same. They called it pricing power. Economists call it price gouging. But here's the most infuriating part. While grocery store profits soared, executive compensation skyrocketed. In 2023, Galen Weston, chairman of Loblaws, earned over $11 million in total compensation. That's $11 million, while Canadian families lined up at food banks in record numbers. One Twitter user summed it up perfectly. Grocery CEOs are getting richer while telling us they have no choice but to raise prices. It's not inflation, it's greed. The post went viral, and millions of Canadians agreed. Because when profits are at record highs, you can't blame rising costs. You can only blame priorities. But corporate profit isn't the only force driving prices up, because even if grocery stores wanted to lower prices, there's a bigger problem lurking in the supply chain. Reason 2, supply chain, monopolies. When 3 companies control everything. Here's a question most Canadians have never thought about. Who brings food from farms to grocery stores? The answer is simpler and more troubling than you'd expect. In Canada, the food supply chain is controlled by a small handful of massive corporations. And when a few companies control everything, they control the prices. Let's start with meat. In Canada, 4 companies process over 85% of all beef sold in the country. Cargill, JBS Tyson Foods, Conagra Brands. These companies buy cattle from farmers, process them into beef, and sell the meat to grocery stores. And because there are only 4 of them, they have enormous pricing power. When they raise prices, grocery stores have no choice but to pay. And when grocery stores pay more, you pay more. But here's the kicker. These companies are making record profits too. In 2023, Cargill reported global revenues of over $177 billion. Tyson Foods reported $13 billion in profit. So while Canadian farmers struggle to break even and Canadian families pay $18 per kilogram for ground beef, meat processors are making billions. And it's not just meat. The dairy industry in Canada operates under a supply management system. This system controls how much milk is produced, who can produce it, and what prices are set. It was designed to protect Canadian dairy farmers, but it also keeps prices artificially high. Because supply is restricted, competition is limited, and imports are blocked with tariffs as high as 245%. The result? Milk in Canada costs nearly double what it costs in the United States. A 4-liter jug of milk in Canada, $6.49. A 1-gallon jug, 3.78 liters. In the US, $2.99. And it's the same for cheese, butter, yogurt, anything made with dairy. Canadian consumers pay the price of a system designed to protect farmers but controlled by a small number of large dairy processors. Then there's produce. Most fresh fruits and vegetables sold in Canada are imported, and the companies that import and distribute them, there are only a few. Oppie, Loblaw-owned distribution networks, and a handful of others control the majority of produce coming into Canada. When these companies raise their prices, grocery stores pass it on to consumers. And because there's so little competition, there's no pressure to keep prices low. One agricultural economist from the University of Guelph explained it this way. Canada's food system is built on consolidation. A few companies control each stage of the supply chain. And when you have that kind of market concentration, prices go up. There's no competitive pressure to bring them down. And here's the worst part, even when farmers lower their prices, consumers rarely see the savings. In 2024, Canadian cattle farmers were being paid less per head of cattle than they were in 2020. But beef prices at grocery stores kept rising. Where did the difference go? To the processors and retailers, the middlemen, the corporations that sit between the farm and your kitchen table. But supply chain monopolies are only part of the equation. Because there's another cost hitting Canadian grocery bills hard, and it's one that most people don't even think about. Reason 3, climate change. Let's talk about something that doesn't make headlines as often as it should. Climate change is driving up food prices. And in 2026, it's worse than ever. Droughts, floods, wildfires, extreme heat. These aren't just environmental disasters, they're economic disasters. Because when crops fail, food gets scarce. And when food gets scarce, prices skyrocket. In 2023, California, which produces over 90% of the leafy greens sold in North America, experienced one of the worst droughts in decades. Lettuce production dropped by 30%. Prices for a single head of romaine lettuce in Canada hit $5.99. In 2024, floods in British Columbia destroyed entire vegetable farms. Carrot and potato crops were wiped out. Prices for root vegetables jumped by 40% in some regions. And in 2025, record heat waves across the Canadian prairies damaged wheat and canola crops. Bread prices climbed. Cooking oil prices surged. Because when staple crops fail, every product made from them gets more expensive. But it's not just about crop failures. Climate change is also driving up transportation costs. Wildfires in 2024 shut down major highways in BC and Alberta for weeks. Trucks couldn't move. Food, couldn't get to stores. And when supply lines are disrupted, prices go up. One logistics expert from Vancouver explained it in an interview. Every time a highway closes, every time a port shuts down due to extreme weather, food gets delayed. And delays mean waste. And waste means higher prices. Climate change is becoming one of the biggest hidden costs in our food system. And globally, the problem is even worse. In 2023, India, one of the world's largest rice exporters, banned rice exports due to a catastrophic harvest failure caused by erratic monsoons. Rice prices in Canada jumped by 35% almost overnight. In 2024, droughts in Spain and Italy devastated olive crops. Olive oil prices tripled. A bottle that used to cost $8 now costs $24. And in 2025, coffee-growing regions in Brazil and Colombia faced unprecedented heat and drought. Coffee prices are now at their highest levels in 30 years. This isn't a temporary blip. This is the new normal. Climate change is making food production more unpredictable, more expensive, and more fragile, and Canadian consumers are paying the price. But if climate change is making food more expensive to grow, the next factor is making it more expensive to move. So the next time your checkout total feels higher again, remember, it's not just inflation. It's supply chains. It's corporate incentives. It's psychology. It's structure. And understanding that changes how you respond. Compare unit prices, question bulk buying, evaluate memberships carefully. Because real financial control doesn't come from changing the system. It comes from understanding it. If this breakdown helped you see grocery inflation differently, consider subscribing. On this channel, we break down the real cost behind everyday spending. Before you buy, watch out for part 2 as we are only getting started. I'll see you there.